Good afternoon, everyone. Raj here again. Welcome back. Today, we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into the QA space and where we see AI agents helping our clients in that space. We'll look at two different types of use cases. One, that's taking business requirements and business documents, translating them all the way through to test cases and test scripts, and actually building individual test scripts for the platforms that the clients have in place. And then the second piece is how do you actually keep those tests evergreen over time? And between those two, most organizations are spending about 90% of their testing resources in those two areas. So applying agentic AI in that space has been super effective in bringing down costs, improving quality, and most importantly, enhancing speed to market. So let's dive right in and let's take a look. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take all the different repositories of business requirements that you have, whether it's in Jira or Azure DevOps or just documents sitting in SharePoint. Our clients have them all over the place. And we are going to extract that documentation and pull it into the context lakehouse. And the context lakehouse that we've talked about in previous videos is just a simple way for us to bring all of this documentation together in a way that the AI can actually understand it better than it can if we just dump those documents in raw into the AI. So first thing is to pull the documents out of those areas and ingest them into the software. And then the AI agent can start actually going through and processing those business requirements. So you see here, there's a whole series of business requirements that got pulled in. The AI agent is going through step by step, reading the documentation, understanding what's going on in the actual document, and laying out a very clear path of how this requirement needs to be tested. And so you'll see it just going systematically through. Typically, each of these things might take somebody a half hour to do, and the AI is actually capable of doing that in an instant. And so you'll see here, if we click into one of these, we've got here a full description of the requirement, the user stories, what the acceptance criteria are for the requirement, what the contents of the requirement are, who the stakeholders are, what type of planning and what types of risks we need to be aware of, in addition to technical requirements, other resources that are attached to this requirement, as well as any metadata around that application. So we can go through, and we've just pulled a small subset of requirements here, but this could be hundreds, if not thousands of requirements with millions of lines of documentation, and the AI agent can just handle them just fine because we're breaking it down into digestible chunks in the context lakehouse. And so from here, we do something that's pretty straightforward for humans to do, and it turns out it's actually fairly straightforward for the AIs to do as well, which is go through each business requirement. And you'll see here that there's full traceability from where that requirement came from, what the requirement code is, and then what the test codes are related to that requirement. So at all times, you have full traceability from the requirement all the way through to the execution of the test. And again, we can click into any of these test cases and see what's going on inside there. And you'll see here, it's just laid out what that test strategy should be. If we've run the test before, it keeps track of when it passed, when it failed, all those types of stats. And we've got the full list of what the test strategy is ultimately going to be. And so we'll see here that at any point in time, we can go look at the detailed business requirements and go look through all the different components that we saw in there. And then inside of the business requirement, we can actually see the test case and all the components of the test case. And so now from the test cases, what we're going to do is we're actually going to select what platforms we want to be implementing these test cases in. So you can have any of your testing harnesses, any of your testing platforms here, and we will customize those test cases to test scripts for those platforms. And so in this case, we're selecting Appium and Playwright. We can select something else as well. And then we have it go generate the test scripts. And it will think for a little while. And then what it'll do is, again, you see this full traceability from the requirement, to the actual requirement ID, to the test case ID, and then for each test case, we've got multiple test scripts based on what it is that we're trying to achieve. And in some cases, you'll see, for example, for this, Appium is not an applicable platform, so it's not going to bother generating the test scripts for that platform. But you're getting a really, really strong head start into what the ultimate test suite is going to look like. And you can do things like prioritize. Which ones do you want to execute every single time? Which ones do you want to only execute in certain scenarios? All of those types of things, and the coverage map can be prioritized. And so we start going through the test cases, and then ultimately what we'll see is once the test cases are all generated, we can go into any of those test scripts and actually look at the code and modify it if we think that the code needs to be modified. And all changes will go back into the repository. And then ultimately from there, what we do is we will go in and actually export these into our test harnesses. So all the test scripts that were written, we connect to the test harness and we upload the test scripts into the test harness. Everything's ready to be tested. Now, what you're going to want to do through here is always put a human in the loop that's reviewing all of this until you get very confident that the AI is generating the perfect answer that you want it to generate. We're not quite there yet. We can get, in most cases, close to 100% correct with 80% of the cases. And then the other 10, 20% are flagged as a human needs to get involved and modify that. So you'll see here, it's just going through and updating everything into the test harness. And now ultimately you're going to have a fully populated test harness with all the right scripts. And now I can go in and look at, okay, what's the work that we did? And in this case, we've gone through, done a lot of work. Clients like to keep a tally of how the AI is being helpful. And here we create some reporting that shows you, okay, here's the amount of time that was saved. Here's the cost that was saved in this last set of test runs. So when you start adding these up over time and over multiple applications, you're talking about tens of millions of dollars of savings that clients typically start realizing, or could be more around productivity gains. So it could be we're getting more code out more frequently. So there are multiple different types of value that can be generated. And of course, all of this reporting can be customized and sent out to the individuals that need to see it. So I'll pause there, and then we'll pick up the evergreen test cases in another video.